Good morning, everyone. And good morning to those who are here in the Zendo and also those who are at home and joining by live stream. My name is Tova Green. I'm a resident of San Francisco's Center City Center. I use she, her pronouns. And I lived at Green Gulch for 2 years, from 2005 to 2007. And after that, returned to City Center, which was the first temple I lived at. And I also spent some time at 4 years at Pasahara as part of my training as a priest. I want to thank Timo, the Tanto, for inviting me to give this talk today. And I also want to express my gratitude to my teacher, Agent Linda Cutts, who lives here at Green Gulch. And she's been my teacher for about 25 years. Incredibly grateful to her for her support. My work practice position at City Center is, I'm going to share it with you because I will refer to it in my talk. I'm what's called the Branching Streams Director. And Branching Streams is the a group of Zen centers and smaller sanghas in the Suzuki Roshi lineage who choose to become affiliates. And there are about 75, about 60 some in the US and about 12 in other countries. And one part of my work as the director is to visit as many of them as I can. So I'll be talking about that a little later in my talk. I just want to say that as I was coming down the steps from and walking towards the Zendo from the parking lot this morning, I passed the open gate of the ranch house, and Mira, who I'm not sure exactly how old she is, maybe 4. I've known her since she was a baby. But she and her mother were watering the garden, and I was carrying a bundle wrapped in a bright cloth with my robes in it. And Mira looked at me and looked at the bundle, and she said, "Did you bring me a birthday present?" I have given her birthday presents in the past, but I had to explain, no, it wasn't a birthday present, but I'll bring one next time I come. But it was very welcoming to see her and her mom watering the garden. Mira had a little watering can, and Lauren had a much bigger watering can. So I also want to mention, and many of you may have heard on the news that former President Trump was I'm not sure what word to use, but there was an attempted assassination. And I imagine most of you or many of you have heard about that on the news. And I just want to mention, because I think it's an indication of the polarization in our country and concerns about gun violence. And I think it contributes to a general feeling of anxiety that many of us experience. And in the light of that, how can we be welcoming towards one another and welcome the stranger? And I thought about, when I was thinking about my talk today, I remembered this amazing statue behind me, Jisan Bodhisattva. And Jisan Bodhisattva is a protector of travelers in particular, but also a protector of children, and a protector of those who are ill, dying, and even those who are deceased. Uh, and I thought I would talk today about how we are all travelers. And so I invite you to imagine that each of us in this Zendo is on a journey, and we are all involved in the journey of our lives. And I'd like to invite you to take a moment to look around at those who are near you, and if possible, turn to someone and just greet them and maybe exchange names. Feel free. Okay, let's come back together. It looks like from I could see many smiles, and I think something that simple can really help us feel connected with the people we're sharing this experience with. So I'm going to, in terms of my talk, and we're all travelers, I'm going to talk a little bit about Jizo Bodhisattva and some of the ways in which we are all travelers in the world today. And then I'll talk a little about some of my travels in my work as Branching Streams Director, and with how do we welcome the stranger. And I will share at least one poem, maybe two, because I love poetry. So when I first came to Green Gulch Farm soon after I moved to the Bay Area in 1990, and it was the first of the three San Francisco Zen temples that I visited. The three are Green Gulch Farm, Tassajara Zen Mountain Center, and City Center. Each one is very unique. And if you haven't visited all three, I hope you have the opportunity to do that. And one thing that I was really appreciative when I first came into the Zendo was both the statue behind most of you, Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, very beautiful face and very settled sitting pose of that statue. And then this Jizo statue, which I had already learned about Jizo, but I learned quite a bit more over the last decades. And Jizo's vow, sometimes it's called Jizo's great vow, is to save all beings, to be available to help anyone who's in need. And all Jizo statues, whether small or large, tend to look like monks, very simple. And they carry a staff with 6 rings. And the idea behind that is that when Jizo walks, the rings, the jingling, will disperse any small creatures that Jizo might otherwise step on. So protecting all beings in that way. And then often Jizos carry a gem, a jewel in the other hand, and that can be thought of as the jewel within each of us, the way in which each of us is an expression of, I could call Buddha nature, of the expansive nature that is within each person. We may not always feel it or know that we even possess it, but it's there. So at one time, I I was in the practice. I made both little and larger clay Jesus, and when I lived at Green Gulch, 2005 to 2007, I remember giving a class on Jizo and a workshop in which we all made small clay Jizos, the clay that dries without needing a kiln. And in 2005, which was the 60th anniversary of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there was a group led by the teachers at Great Vow Monastery in Oregon. Great Vow Monastery was named after Jesus' Great Vow. One of the founding teachers, Chosen Bays, was born the day the US bombed Nagasaki. And her parents were pacifists, so she grew up knowing about that. And she became a pediatrician and as well as a Zen teacher. And on the 60th anniversary, she organized Jesus for Peace pilgrimage to Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and Kyoto. And she had students at Great Vow make little kits so you could make prayer flags and with stamped Jesus on them. And they went out widely to Dharma groups and other groups all around the US and some to other countries as well. And the idea was she wanted to bring, I think it was 270,000 images of Jizo on this pilgrimage to Japan as a way of giving something back. So some of them were on these prayer flags with the printed Jizos, and each one I made several. You would put your name, location, and how many Jizos were on that particular prayer flag. People also folded origami Jizos and made small clay Jizos. And on the pilgrimage, we took all of those with us and gave most of them away. And people greatly appreciated these Jizos. And we visited many Jizo temples in Japan. So I got to really experience the healing quality of Jizos. And frequently at crossroads, there'd be a small shrine or altar with a statue of Jizo protecting travelers in that place. And here at Green Gulch, there's a Jizo garden. There's one at Great Vow Monastery too that's in the woods, and it's quite beautiful, many trails, and you turn a corner and there's up in a tree a statue of Jizo. But our Jizo garden here has a number of clay Jizos, and it's often the site of a destination for a workshop that honors children and others who have died. And perhaps some of you have been to one of those workshops where people make make messages to the ones they love, and some of them end up on the trees in the Jizo garden. It's one of my favorite places at Green Gulch. So on the theme of we are all travelers, excuse me, I just want to find my watch so I have a sense of how long I've been speaking. So in the world we're in today, some of us are easily able to travel. Some of us have traveled as students to other countries or other parts of this country. Some of us as adults on vacation or sometimes as part of our work. But there are also many people on our planet today who are forced to travel. As we know, refugees, asylum seekers, those displaced by war or by the climate disasters, I would say. And many people in our cities who are without fixed homes, who move from place to place. And some, some travels are full of discovery and joy, or meeting loved ones, seeing art or hearing music, or opportunities to learn and grow. And other travelers experience a lot of hardship in their travels. But we're all, I think of each of us in this room now today as a traveler on our life journey. For those of you who don't live here, must wonder what brought you here today, what drew you to come, especially if it's your first time. What about Green Gulch, and what were your first impressions? And for those who live here, could ask also, when did you first come, and what stood out for you that led you to come back and spend more time here? And for some of you, thank you so much for keeping this place as beautiful as it is. Those who work on the farm and garden, hospitality, the kitchen. It's a very nourishing place for so many of us, whether we're here just for Dharma Talk or here for part of our, a significant part of our lives. And it's always, in some ways a refuge. Green Gulch, I think all three temples and most Zen centers. So I think, when we think about journeying and what we learn, one of the things is that we may find our perspective on things broadens. And something we thought was a certain way, we may realize is not what we thought. There's a passage that I love. It's in one of the writings of Dogen. Dogen was a Japanese monk who lived from 1200 to 1253 and traveled to China, where he stayed at different monasteries and found a teacher and brought that kind of monastic practice back to Japan. And he wrote quite a lot. His writing is very poetic. He uses many images in his prose, but he also wrote poems. And there's a passage in the Genjo Koan, which I once learned, I knew by heart, but I can partly read it and partly remember it. When you sail out in a boat to the midst of the ocean where no land is in sight, and you view the four directions, the ocean looks circular and does not look any other way. But the ocean is neither round nor square. Its features are infinite in variety. But you see and understand only what your eye of practice can reach at that time. So what he means by that is, our eye of practice can, and he means practicing meditation, Zen meditation. But as we practice, or as we travel, as our perspectives change through what we learn, we can see things in a different way. And he says, all things are like this. So I think travel is extremely valuable for learning different perspectives and maybe questioning some of the things that we think we know, especially being in another culture and sometimes learning another language can also help with that. So I'll talk a little bit about as Branching Streams director, I was given the advice by the person who had the position before me, Steve Weintraub, who some of you may know. He also lives at Green Gulch Farm. He told me to visit as many of the centers as I could. And I took that to heart. And just recently, I visited Steve Sangha, Presidio Hill, which is in San Francisco. And I was asked to give a Dharma talk there while Steve was away. And a few weeks ago, I went to Los Angeles to visit my sister and also visited Beginner's Mind Temple, a Zen center that's been there quite a while in Northridge, and met the Sangha there. And prior to that, I was asked by Jiryu, your abbot, to go with him to Medellin in Colombia. Jiryu has been there many times and was the guiding teacher of that Sangha until he recently gave Dharma transmission, which is authorization to teach, to San Riki, who is the resident teacher at the Zen Center in Colombia. It's called Montaña de Silencio, Mountain of Silence. So I was going to go with Jiryu in late March, and we were going to be there for 2 weeks. And at the beginning, ordained 2 people as priests, and then have a 5-day retreat in the hills outside Medellin. Medellin is in a valley. And then a lay ordination for 8 people at the end. And I had never been to South America or specifically to Colombia. And I only have junior high school level Spanish knowledge. So as it turned out, Jiryu was unable to go. And the night before we were going to leave, there was a student named Caroline who had gone missing at Tassajara, and she was Jiryu's student. And so Jiryu felt he couldn't. First, he postponed his trip and asked if I would go as planned. So I said certainly I would. And then he realized he couldn't come because Caroline was found. She died at Tassajara. And so in my travels, I was met by someone at the airport in Medellin. We found each other through photographs we exchanged on WhatsApp, and she was really kind and oriented me to the city and took a beautiful route to get to the Zen Center. And I was welcomed at the Zen Center. There was one person who had lived at Green Gulch in Gyoku, and she spoke English. So she was my translator for the 2 weeks that I was there. And I really also tried to immerse myself in Spanish till by the end I could chant in Spanish and do part of a ceremony in Spanish with her coaching. The Sangha was extremely friendly and welcoming, and we had to pack everything up and move it to this retreat center out of, in the mountains in order to do the retreat and then the lay ordination ceremony. And everyone worked together. It was a beautiful example of cooperation. And I came away feeling so connected to that Sangha. And I'm learning Spanish. I'm trying to learn with Duolingo, but also there's someone at City Center who is from Uruguay, and we're going to meet to practice speaking in Spanish. So that really has expanded my horizons, and also having a chance to, see a Zen center in another part of the world that felt so familiar. As I visit these centers, there's something about the warm practice, which is Suzuki Roshi's legacy. And each center I visit, no matter where it is, has an image of Suzuki Roshi on the altar. And there's a phrase, the wind of the family house. It feels like an extended family, this network of Zen centers everywhere. Not everywhere, but in many places. So I feel so fortunate to have that opportunity to support these teachers and sanghas in many places as my work. How lucky can a person be? I don't know. I feel very lucky. And also, experiencing when I visit a place, I'm a guest, and what is it to be a guest? What are the expectations? How can I honor the practice at each place I go to, and appreciate the offerings of the host? There's the way in which a person is received and greeted that really makes the difference in how welcome a guest can feel. So I want to share a poem that has to do with that. One of my favorite poets, Naomi Shihab Nye, wrote this poem. And Naomi lives in San Antonio, and her father was Palestinian and her mother American. And as a child, she went with her family to Jerusalem, where I think her grandmother lived. So this is her poem called Red Brocade. The Arabs used to say, when a stranger appears at your door, feed him for 3 days before asking who he is, where he's come from, where he's headed. That way, he'll have the strength enough to answer. Or by then you'll be such good friends, you don't care. Let's go back to that. Rice, pine nuts. Here, take the red brocade pillow. My child will serve water to your horse. No, I was not busy when you came. I was not preparing to be busy. That's the armor everyone puts on to pretend they had a purpose in the world. I refuse to be claimed. Your plate is waiting. We will snip fresh mint into your teeth. So I once had the pleasure of visiting Naomi in her home in San Antonio, and she invited me for lunch, and I truly felt this poem came alive. She was such a wonderful host. And there's something very generous about her spirit. If any of you have the opportunity, she often offers a retreat at Tassajara with Paul Hauer, who's a senior Dharma teacher at City Center. And she just has this way of including everyone. So welcoming I'll just say a few words about welcoming. I've often had the experience of coming to Green Gulch and often to see Linda Ruth, my teacher. And even I was here a couple of weeks ago to assist with a ceremony. And can't remember what the occasion was, but I was walking with Linda Ruth back towards the parking lot, and someone stopped and was asking for directions and had never been to Green Gulch. And I just watched Linda welcome this person and tell them a little about Green Gulch and give them directions to where they were going. And then we continued walking. Answering questions with friendliness. And I think that's something we can all do, wherever we are, in meeting a stranger. I'll just tell one other story that happened for me. I was actually, it was when I was coming back from Colombia, and I got back fairly late, and I didn't want to disturb anyone at City Center to pick me up, and I also didn't want to take a Lyft or an Uber, so I took Muni, and I decided to get off a couple of stops before I would be close enough to City Center and maybe call a Lyft from there. And I realized that my phone the battery was very low, and I was standing on a corner outside a restaurant in Glen Park trying to contact an Uber, and I was not being successful. And after about 5 minutes, a couple came out of the restaurant and they said they had seen me and did I need any help? And I said, well, yes, maybe you can help me call an Uber or a Lyft. And they called one for me and paid for it. And they were just so kind. And we talked, and they had been to City Center at one time. It was just amazing. But we were total strangers. And I found sometimes when I'm traveling, people are incredibly open and helpful. And I think that's, for me, one of the joys of traveling, meeting these situations where I get lost sometimes and someone will help me. So I think that's where I will stop with my talk today. I think I'll read Red Brocade one more time to see if it sounds at all different this time. I think with a good poem, it's helpful to hear it more than once. And then we'll have time for questions, comments, discussion. So, Red Brocade. The Arabs used to say, when a stranger appears at your door, feed him or her for 3 days before asking who they are, where they're from, where they're headed. That way, they'll have strength enough to answer. Or by then, you'll be such good friends, you don't care. Let's go back to that. Rice, pine nuts. Here, take the red brocade pillow. My child will serve water to your horse. No, I was not busy when you came. I was not preparing to be busy. That's the armor everyone put on us to pretend they had a purpose in the world. I refuse to be claimed. Your plate is waiting. We will snip fresh mint into your teeth. So thank you so much for your attention. And let's see if anyone has anything you'd like to either share from your own experience. I see a hand right there, or a question or a comment. I'm reaching for my glasses so I can see you. And if you wouldn't mind, say your name when you ask a question or make a comment.
Thank you. Is this on? Okay, good. Thank you. I enjoyed your talk. One thing I've always been very curious about, what's the halo behind the statue's head?
I'm not sure. I don't think it's actually a halo, but sometimes statues of the Buddha have this round background behind them, but most Jesus statues don't have that. I'm not sure. Maybe the artist thought that would make it more complete, or that could be maybe a symbol for the whole world. I'm not sure. What is your name? Jennifer. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I don't actually know. Is the one online?
No, it's me.
Oh, it's you, Ray.
My name is Ray, and thank you for your talk. I really appreciated your stories. And one thing you talked about reminded me of a story of being in New York City, and I'm a small town person. I'm not in cities, and I was going from one Zen center to the airport and totally confused. I was on a bus, totally confused about which line to take in the subway, and had maybe the best time of the whole trip watching the people in the seats around me talk about the best way for me to get to the airport. And, oh, the sea line's closed today because there's a game in here. And me being in need and traveling just made this great community spring up in the seats around me. And it's a really happy memory of mine. So thank you for bringing that back to mind.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for sharing that story. Yeah, and you said sometimes when you have a need, a community will form.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have another poem about that, actually, by Naomi Shihab that I might share, but let's see if there are other questions first. Yes.
Thank you for your talk. My name is Anna. I really enjoyed the poem that you read, and I find that it's very difficult nowadays to be welcoming to strangers when we're in fear of everything. So how could we nowadays bring our guards down and be welcoming?
Did everyone hear that question? Yeah. I think you might start with someone that you might feel safer with, like being friendly or to someone when you're in a shop, like asking the shopkeeper. Sometimes I find in grocery stores now, especially find this when I go to Trader Joe's, the person at the cash register asks me how my day is going. And then I will just ask them how their day is going. And, start a little conversation, and we're strangers. And that is pretty, you feel pretty safe in a situation like that. And practice, and then you may be able to extend it to someone when you're waiting for a bus. This is a stranger at the bus stop. This happened to me the other day. I was waiting for a bus, and the person who was waiting there started a conversation with me, and then we found we had some interests in common. By the end of the time the bus by the time the bus got there. So you can choose, I think basically we're all human beings. And I think trying to find those common threads can help relieve some of that suspiciousness that we may feel, And it's hard these days because there is so much violence in the world. But I think still most people want to connect with others. So I encourage you to give it a try. Thank you, Anna.
Hi, Tova. Yeah, this is Sid.
Hi, Sid.
Thank you for your talk. I just got back from a trip to San Luis Obispo, which is a bit smaller of a town than San Francisco, which is where I live. And I had this distinct, funny experience of going on a run on a path near the ocean, and everyone that I passed by, I was surprised that they were looking at me in the eye. I was like, oh, wow, okay, they're looking at me and smiling. This is different than what I normally experience in the city, where you're walking down the street and kind of don't really look at the person who's walking, going past you. And I think I feel that maybe in a city, it's because there's so many people, there's a lot of stimulation. It can be kind of overwhelming to take in every being that you're passing. And so I was wondering if you had any suggestions for, being with that overwhelm or continuing to stay open in those situations where, in the city or in other places where there's really just all that stimulation. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's striking how your experience in San Luis Obispo, where people were looking at you and smiling. I find that sometimes happens in the city, but not always. And there's a lot of stimulation. Maybe I can choose where you might experiment with that, perhaps in a park where people are, there to enjoy it. I've found there's a park, Dubose Park, where people walk their dogs, and most people will make eye contact there. They're not in a hurry. Sometimes on public transportation, but it's harder in the city. And I think we're also still coming out of the pandemic. It may seem strange to say that, but I think the pandemic made people a lot more cautious about contact with others and wearing masks for that period of time. To actually look at someone who's not wearing a mask, it's a gift. So I think also there's some times when you might feel more open than other times, and there are times when you might really not want to make eye contact. So I would say check in with yourself, and sometime when you might be feeling more open and wanting to be friendly. See what happens if you look at people in the eye and smile. They might smile back. I grew up in New York City, and when I go back to New York, which I haven't done in a little while, but even there, I try sometimes to make eye contact. And sometimes people respond because that was your experience, right? So you never know. Thank you for the question.
Hello. My name is Noah. And
Excuse me, could you speak into the mic maybe a little better?
there we go.
Yeah.
My name is Noah. And I was drawn to share two brief stories from my journeys. one about a rainmaker I met and another about the ocean, because you brought that up. Recently, I met an incredible ringmaker who had a chest with all sorts of beautiful rings that he had made by himself from around the world. And we got talking, and there was this one ring that he had made with the Star of David on it, and underneath was the geometric, sacred geometry for the seed of life. Louder. And he turned out to be from Israel, and so is my father. And both of them have something in common, which is that their sons, they've completely separated from that culture. I don't know any Hebrew. I'm not associated with that culture specifically. But it was really a joy talking to him about how he has rewritten his lineage to come from a place of love and not necessarily denounced anything, but just rewritten his own story to find peace and love in himself. And he lived for a while in Tibet. And he said that when he was in Tibet, that people treated him like he was a good person and that he was worthy of love. And so he actually believed that he was. And then he actually went back to New York City after 2 years in the mountains. And he said people were looking at him sideways and people were in their own spaces, I suppose. And he began to question if he was still that person worthy of what he felt when he was in Tibet. And it was a really beautiful story. And I ended up buying the little ring and took a picture for my own dad and brought him a lot of joy as well. And the second thing I wanted to share is.
Can I just ask you a question about the first one? The person you encountered, you said was a rainmaker?
Yeah.
Did he make reins for horses or?
It was rings for people.
Reins for people.
Like a ring, like a little ring on their finger.
Oh, thank you. Ring maker.
I noticed some talking quickly.
Okay, that's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
And what he shared about when he was in Tibet, when people were smiling at him, he internalized some of that feeling, and then it was hard to keep when he went back to New York and people were looking askance. And it really makes a difference how we look at each other even. Yeah. Okay, you wanted to share another story.
I suppose because you said that, the last thing he said was not to spend your love like dollar bills, because if you give love, like it doesn't go away. You don't lose any, you have like an endless well. So I guess for the ringmaker in my conversation, the thesis was like, love is in the giving, which your talk just reminded me of that. And I'm so grateful. So thank you. And the second was, I've crossed a number of oceans. It's what I do for work. And what you said about the shape of the sea is something really personal for me. And I felt compelled to tell us just the story of being in the middle of the ocean and watching the sunrise with no obstruction anywhere around. Now you can't see exactly where you're going to fetch up on the horizon, it's just blue. And behind you, you can't see exactly where you've come from either. You just kind of see your glittering wake, like disperse off into the blue. And it's such a deeply impactful image to have felt and to have been in. And I just wanted to bring attention to that story you shared about the shape and the formlessness of the sea and our perception of it. It was so nice to hear that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, thank you for sharing your experience of the ocean. Yeah, this question over here.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you for sharing your first poem, which was really powerful. And I just wanted to request if you would share the second one that you brought. I'm really curious. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think I will end with the second poem. It's a bit long. It's really a story. It's called Gate A4. So this has also to do with traveling. And knowing Naomi, I know it was a true story. So this is by Naomi Shihab Gate A4. Wandering around the Albuquerque Airport terminal, after learning my flight had been delayed 4 hours, I heard an announcement. If anyone in the vicinity of Gate A4 understands Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. Well, one pauses these days. Gate A4 was my own gate. I went there. An older woman in full traditional Palestinian embroidered dress, just like my grandma wore, was crumpled to the floor, wailing loudly. Help, said the flight service person. Talk to her. What is her problem? We told her the flight was going to be late, and she did this. I stooped to put my arm around the woman and spoke to her haltingly. Shudawa, and this is Naomi speaking Arabic, so I'm not sure that I'm getting it right, but here it is. Shudawa, Shubid Habibti, Shtani Shwe, Min Padlak, Shubitsiri. The minute she heard any word she knew, however poorly used, she stopped crying. She thought the flight had been canceled entirely. She needed to be in El Paso for major medical treatment the next day. I said, no, we're fine. You'll get there just later. Who is picking you up? Let's call him. We called her son, and I spoke with him in English. I told him I would stay with his mother till we got on the plane and would ride next to her, southwest. She talked to him. Then we called her other sons, just for the fun of it. Then we called my dad, and he and she spoke for a while in Arabic and found out, of course, they had 10 shared friends. Then I thought, just for the heck of it, why not call some Palestinian poets I know and let them chat with her? This all took about 2 hours. She was laughing a lot by then, telling about her life, patting my knee, answering questions. She had pulled a sack of homemade mamul cookies, little powdered sugar, crumbly mounds, stuffed with dates and nuts, out of her bag, and was offering them to all the people at the gate. To my amazement, not a single person declined one. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the mom from California, the lovely woman from Laredo, we were all covered with the same powdered sugar and smiling. There is no better cookie. And then the airline broke out free beverages from huge coolers, and 2 little girls from our flight ran around serving us all apple juice. And they were covered with powdered sugar too. And I noticed my new best friend, by now we were holding hands, had a potted plant poking out of her bag, some medicinal thing with green furry leaves. Such an old country traveling tradition. Always carry a plant. Always stay rooted to somewhere. And I looked around that gate of late and weary ones and thought, this is the world I want to live in. The shared world. Not a single person in that gate, once the crying of confusion stopped, seemed apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug all those other women too. This can happen anywhere. Not everything is lost. I think that's a really good poem for us today. So I just we're going to do the closing chant, but I want to invite you, if you stay for tea outside, to talk to someone you don't know during the tea and share your name and maybe a little more. So thank you so much for your attention.